In sacred texts across civilizations, women are often present, but not always visible. The Qur'an, revealed over 1,400 years ago, speaks directly to women, about women, and sometimes for women. To some, it was a liberation. To others, a beginning of deeper questions. Today we explore: what does the Qur'an really say about women? What rights did it give? What limits did it set? And how does it all hold up under the lens of critical thinking? 1. Spiritual equality. The Qur'an begins with a striking principle, that both men and women are equal before God. In Surah Al-Ahzab, verse 35, the Qur'an lists believers, men and women, side by side. The Muslim men and Muslim women, the believing men and believing women. God has prepared for them forgiveness and a great reward. This kind of pairing is not an exception in the Qur'an, it's a pattern. In terms of spiritual worth, moral responsibility, and accountability, the Qur'an speaks to both sexes equally. This alone was a profound shift in 7th century Arabia, where lineage and male authority defined identity. But what happens when we move from the spiritual to the legal and social? 2. Legal rights and historical reforms. The Qur'an brought radical change for women in its time. It gave women the right to inherit property, the right to consent to marriage, the right to own wealth and to initiate divorce. In Surah An-Nisa, verse 7, for men is a share of what the parents and close relatives leave, and for women is a share. This was a bold legal declaration for its time, a world in which women often had no legal personhood at all. But the reforms were not symmetrical. Men were given a double share in inheritance. Men retained the exclusive right to polygyny. Men were cast as the protectors and maintainers of women. The question then is this: were these rulings a universal moral blueprint? Or were they meant for a specific time in society? 3. Inheritance and economic assumptions. While women gained inheritance rights, their shares were often half that of men's. In Surah An-Nisa, verse 11, the Qur'an states, to the male, a portion equal to that of 2 females. The reasoning is tied to a financial structure. Men were expected to provide for the household, while women could keep what they earned. But what happens in a world where women also provide? Where they manage wealth, pay bills, and lead families? Critically speaking, the assumption of economic dependence behind this rule no longer applies universally. And so, modern readers ask, is the rule still just, or is the principle of justice calling for reevaluation? 4. Polygyny and marital structure. The Qur'an permits men to marry up to 4 wives, but only with strict conditions of justice and fairness. In Surah An-Nisa, verse 3, marry women of your choice, 2 or 3 or 4, but if you fear you will not be just, then only 1. This verse regulated a practice that already existed, polygyny, but added a moral condition, justice. The irony? In Surah An-Nisa, verse 129, the Qur'an itself admits, you will never be able to be just between wives, even if you strive. Critically, this sets up a tension. If justice is the condition, and justice is impossible, then what's the ideal? In the modern world, polygyny is rarely seen as equitable. And this verse invites debate. Is the Qur'an endorsing, limiting, or quietly discouraging the practice? 5. Testimony and gendered assumptions. Another verse that sparks intense debate lies in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 282, the longest verse in the Quran. In the context of financial contracts, it states, "Bring 2 men as witnesses, but if 2 men are not available, then 1 man and 2 women." The reason given? That 1 woman might remind the other. Historically, this made sense. Most women weren't part of public commerce. But today, it raises questions of intellectual parity. Was this rule meant as a comment on all women? Or was it a practical safeguard for a specific kind of transaction in a specific time? A critical lens sees this not as a universal statement on gender, but a legal strategy within a historical economy. 6. Qur'an and the male guardian role. Now we come to perhaps the most contested verse in the conversation on women in the Qur'an. Surah An-Nisa, verse 34. Men are qawamin, maintainers, protectors, over women. The verse outlines a hierarchical family model, men as financial providers, women as supporters. It also speaks of discipline, including the controversial phrase, "As for those from whom you fear rebellion, admonish them, forsake them in bed, and strike them." This word, strike, has been translated in many ways. As literal hitting, as symbolic withdrawal, or as separate from them. From a critical standpoint, the question is not just what the word means, but whether the entire verse reflects divine ethics or a 7th century social structure. Modern ethics struggle with any reading that appears to allow violence or control in marriage. Thus, scholars debate, is this verse a permanent rule or a temporary regulation of patriarchy until something better emerges? Final reflection. In conclusion, the Quran presents a complex picture of women. It affirms their spiritual equality. It grants them legal rights that were revolutionary in their time. But it also reflects the patriarchal norms of the society in which it was revealed. Critically speaking, the Quran gave women a voice, but not always a fully equal seat at the table. Today, the question is not just how we read the Quran, but whether we are reading it through a lens of context, ethics, and justice, or simply through the lens of tradition. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly the kind of question the Quran was meant to provoke. If you found this video insightful, please like, subscribe, and share. We're just getting started with deeper dives into the Quran, technology, and the ethics in between.